From the Gospel of Luke, chapter 19, verses 1 through 10. He entered Jericho and was passing through, and there was a man named Zacchaeus. He was chief tax collector and rich. And he sought to see who Jesus was, but could not on account of the crowd, because he was small of stature. So he ran on ahead and climbed up a sycamore tree to see him, for he was to pass that way. And Jesus came to the place, and he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, make haste and come down, for I must stay at your house today. So he made haste and came down and received him joyfully. And when they saw it, they all murmured, he has gone into be a guest of a man who is a sinner. And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, Behold, Lord, half of my goods I give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone anything, I will restore it fourfold. And Jesus said to him, Today salvation has come to this house, since he also is the son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. Friends, this is the word of the Lord. In all the time I've been in the ministry, I've seen some pretty amazing things. I have seen true miracles, and I've been out to places where things have happened in great and wonderful ways. I've been to the cemetery, and while I'm preaching the funeral, there at the cemetery, I've had a deer or a fox or a wild animal come up very close and just lay down. Amazing stuff. People all around. So, it is a wonderful faith. One of the great words of our Christian religion is the word faith, right? It's so great that it's the center of our beliefs. In fact, what we say, it is the center of all of our faith. Faith is the center of the faith. Maybe in no other age is so important that we live by faith in the Lord as people here today. Having faith in God's love, in God's justice, in his kindness, in his great care for our lives, that God simply knows what God is doing, and God's doing it at the right time. Habakkuk is a perfect example of that. That's where the phrase, the just shall live by faith, comes from. He saw terrible things, and he's saying to God, hey, we're being faithful here, this kind of stuff. And he said, just wait, have faith. Well, we seem to live in a time when so many are trying to live without faith. And I think I see that in many parts of age groups, not just younger people. Sometimes we want to blame the millennials for these things, millennials, whatever. But it's in many groups. We as individual Christians need to live with a great faith. In this time, in this place today, it may be the greatest witness in our lives that we live by faith. Sometimes it's pretty hard to live by faith. People demand certain things of us. They talk to us. Hey, this should be happening, that. And say, have faith. This morning, the Old Testament reading is from this small Old Testament book of the prophet Habakkuk. Habakkuk is a funny little book. It would probably not be in the Bible except for that one line that defines the whole book. The just shall live by faith. The New International Version of the Bible says, the righteous shall live by faith. Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 4. The just shall live by faith. That's a line from the King James Version of the Bible. It sounds cooler, the just shall live by faith. That's us. This small book, largely forgotten by many today, is a book written as a dialogue between this prophet Habakkuk and God. It's just 3 chapters. It's very short. It's the last chapter is a long prayer by Habakkuk about no matter what happens, he is going to trust in God's great love. He is confident of that. Habakkuk is trying to answer the question, Is God a loving and caring God when he allows, all these bad things to happen, the evil in the world? It's a study in theology called theodicy. Webster defines this little word this way: a justification for the existence, justice, and the goodness of God in the light of the existence of evil. How could a good God allow evil to happen? That sort of thing. Habakkuk is concerned the leaders of Israel are oppressing the poor. So he asks God why he allows these wicked people to prosper. And in the course of the conversation, God tells Habakkuk that the Babylonians are going to come, and these Babylonians are going to punish these people. Now Habakkuk's even more alarmed, because if he's worried about the leaders of Israel, but he's more worried about the Babylonians. These are worse people than what he's just talking about. And he's almost sorry that he asked God about it. And one of the conversations it's one of those conversations that just goes from bad to worse, You hope it ends soon because you don't want any more bad news from God. And God's simple answer to him, he says, the just shall live by faith. And God adds that they need to have assurance that what God is doing is right. And God tells Habakkuk that in the end, the Babylonians will be punished for the evil things that they're doing. They are not going to get off scot-free. In fact, no one is going to get off scot-free. Well, how is our faith today? What have you done, to strengthen your faith? What have you changed? When I say strengthen faith, I think of when the man brings his son to Jesus because he's thrown himself in the fire and Jesus says, "Where is your faith?" And he says, "Where's your belief?" He says, "Help my unbelief." He doesn't know what to do exactly. So what have we done to strengthen our faith? How have we changed? What have we done to ourselves, The short book of Habakkuk does not answer the question of the problem of evil. Why is there evil in the world? Why is this bad thing happening to me or my children or my friends or my country? What Habakkuk does teach is simply this: we can go on living and believing in God in spite of not knowing all the answers. The just shall live by faith. Living by faith alone is one of the great lines, thoughts, and teachings of the Bible. It is identified again and again, and one of the great things that every teacher in the Bible does is summarize the law, the faith, that sort of thing. David did in Psalm 15, and he has 11 teachings on Isaiah 6, Isaiah 33, Micah 6, Amos, Habakkuk, seek me and live in Amos, the just shall live by faith in Habakkuk. Jesus summed up the law in his great twofold. Love God, Lord, all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the other one's like it, love your neighbor as yourself. Paul quoted Habakkuk. He was the most famous one. Romans 1:17. For in the gospel, a righteousness that is real, a righteousness that is by faith from first to last, just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith. Faith is that, not exactly tangible thing, but sometimes just the power of faith changes things. To stand in the middle of that storm 1 second longer than the other person because you believe that God is with you. To do things that people are calling you not to do. Having that little bit of faith. The just shall live by faith. It's taken up by Martin Luther in 1517. This one line probably did more to change his life and the countless lives of millions throughout the world. And he did it 3-part. He said, faith alone, Scripture alone, Christ alone. I'll try not to do the Latin because I can't remember it. Living in faith is very hard, I have to admit. You know, I wrote this sermon 11 or 12 years ago, but I have a line in here that about a person dying. But just this past week, a friend of mine, his daughter was killed in an automobile accident. And it's exactly the same line that I have in here today. When things like that happen, when terrible things happen, it's hard to remember that we live by faith. But many times it is only the faith that carries us through those terrible times. Faith is so very important. You have it, I have it. The writer of the book of Hebrews wrote a whole chapter, chapter 11. And it's a great chapter on faith. If you want to read about faith this afternoon, before the Steeler game, I think it's on. It might do you well, read about faith before the game. Chapter 11 of Hebrews. The first line is probably the greatest. Now, faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. And it says, this is what the ancients were commended for. Hebrews is a wonderful book. And if you notice, Hebrews at the end of the Pauline literature. But instead of being from Paul or whoever, it's unnamed. It's a Hebrew book. It's a book about the Hebrews. So there is this romantic, maybe more than romantic, it might be true, that the reason Hebrews is named Hebrews is written by a woman. So I'm sure that many of the books were written by women, but this one may very well have been. It's a really great book. Read it this afternoon. It's chapter 11. In all that you do in this life, make it your goal to live by faith. You live it by trusting in God and praying and making known to God all that's happening in your life. You live by faith in serving those places that God gives you to serve. And faith raises our joy and our hope, because we know that we're not the only ones that are involved in this. God is involved in this. Faith is not easy, and it is not always pretty. God promised to walk with all of us all the way. His promise is that he will provide, that he will make the way possible, that he will open unopenable doors, that he will give the grace and the strength, everything that's needed. Jesus knew that there would be times that we wanted to give up. He knew that there would be burdens that we would begin to carry and we begun to break under. And so he called to us, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. God calls us to live by faith. Habakkuk said, the just shall live by faith. And let us live in that great faith.